In this video, we are going to talk about how to use Hermit to manage tools for your software project. Has this ever happened to you? You're able to successfully build your application on your laptop. But when one of your teammates tries to do the same thing, they're unable to because they don't have all of the tooling necessary installed on their laptop. Or potentially even worse, they do have the tool installed, but they have the incorrect version of the tool installed, so they're still not able to build. Even if all of your developer machines are set up correctly with the same versions of the same tools across the board, you still have a problem because once you get to your CI process does not have those tools installed. Or those agents don't have the correct versions of the tools installed. And unfortunately, your organization is not at the point in the CI process to where you can use ephemeral agents to where you can pick specific images for the right tool and the right version. So you're still dependent upon having your tools installed on your static agents. Now, you could use a configuration management tool to manage the installation and ongoing maintenance of those tools and the versions of those tools, not only on your static agents, but also on your developer laptops. But what if I told you there was a simpler way to do this? Enter an open source project from the Cache Cloud Platform team at Square called Hermit. Hermit manages isolated, self-bootstrapping sets of tools inside of your software projects. Here's our starting point for today. I have a Jenkins LTS controller version 2.303.1, and attached to this controller, I have an agent that is based on Linux. The only piece of software that we've installed specifically on the agent is Java for the agent process. So that means no extra binaries have been installed on the agent. The link to the sample repository that we're going to be going through in this video is down in the description. Check the README for links to all of the other content that we're looking at today. Here's a link to the Hermit documentation. The link to this is going to be in the README of the sample repository. And as we can see here, Hermit manages isolated self-bootstrapping sets of tools in software projects. Now, what is a software project? It may be a real application. Maybe it's a repository where you're managing your infrastructure as code. It doesn't matter. All of those are software projects. So Hermit can help you manage the tooling for the actual project that you have. Here's one key thing to keep in mind. Only one person has to install Hermit. Now you might be asking, okay, why only one person? Well, more people can have Hermit installed if you want. But in the context of this video, somebody has to have Hermit installed, the binary for Hermit installed, so that the repository of where your software project is can have the Hermit configurations added to it. So for this example, think of me as the person that is bootstrapping this new project. And I am going to go in and set up the Hermit configurations using the Hermit CLI. Now I want to call out one thing. Before we go any further, you need to understand that Hermit currently only works with Mac OS and with Linux. So if you're doing development on a Windows machine, Hermit is not going to work for you. So now that we've talked about that, I'm running on Mac OS. My agent is a Linux-based agent, so I know that Hermit is going to work for me in my project. Let's say you are that person that is going to be running Hermit to set up the project to use the Hermit configurations. What do you need to do in order to install Hermit? Well, if you can click over to Get Started, it's going to show you installing Hermit is straightforward, and you just do curl and do the installation from there. It provides an installation script for you. You can also install the shell hooks to get other information for you. So if you want to do that, great. If you don't, great as well. At this point, I have already installed Hermit on my machine. Now let's take a quick look at the project that we're going to be working in today. Now, by the time you take a look at this project on GitHub, this project will be complete. So I'm starting from this point. By the time we get to the end of the video, this project will have all of the files necessary to run the project. So watch this video from the beginning to the end, and you'll understand how Hermit is being added into this project. So let's take a quick look at our Jenkinsfile. And this is going to be a very simple process here. Let's assume that we're going to be just making a call out to the GitHub API against one of my repositories to get commit information, and then we're going to parse it with JQ. Now think about it just for a moment that my agent does not have JQ installed. So just to prove this out, I'm going to go ahead and go set up my job inside of my controller and run it and see what happens when we hit the JQ call. So let's go over to our controller. I'm going to create a new item. I'm going to call this Hermit and pipeline and OK. I'm going to go ahead and change this over to pipeline script from SCM. I'm going to select Git. I'm going to reach over here, grab my URL that I already have to the side. There we go. My branch is main, and my script path is Jenkinsfile. Let's just double check that. The answer is Jenkinsfile. Yes, it is. All right, so let's go ahead and click on Save, and then click on Build Now and see what happens. Now, this should run pretty fast, so we shouldn't have to fast forward through things, but hey, you just never know. Let's see what we get here. Okay, we've got our clone. We make the call, so we make the curl call. Now, curl comes installed with my Linux distribution, which happens to be CentOS. So curl worked, but the JQ command is not found. Now, I could go in and manually install JQ. I could use some sort of configuration management tool and install JQ, but I want to be able to control the version of JQ along with my application. So let's see how we do this going on to the next step. I'm here in the root of my project directory. So Jenkins example hermit, I'm in the main branch. The first thing that I need to do is I am going to type hermit space init. And what's going to happen is it's going to create 4 new files under a bin directory within my Jenkins example hermit project. So I have a readme hermit.md, an activate hermit, a hermit, and a hermit.hcl. So the first thing that I'm going to need to do in order for everything to start working is I need to activate the environment. So the one thing that I need to do here is I'm going to just do a dot. Now I could go ahead and specify the full path, or I could just as easily do /bin/activate-hermit. Let's see what happens. So now the hermit environment is now activated. Let's flip over to my VS Code. Now let's take a look at Git and just take a quick look at the files that were created for us. We have the activate hermit, which is just a shell script. We have hermit, which again is just another shell script. We have a hermit.hcl, which is currently empty. We will be revisiting this after a while. And then we have a readme that says, this is a hermit bin directory. The symlinks in this directory are managed by hermit, and so on and so forth. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is all of these are already staged. So I'm going to say added hermit. And I'm going to go ahead and push this up to my repository. And let's flip back over to here and just take a look at what the repository is like. We can now see here that we have our bin directory and the 4 files. So since I was the one starting, I had hermit installed already locally on my machine. I did a hermit init, and then I activated hermit within this project. Now remember, that is within this project. If I go outside of this project, hermit is not activated. So where do we go get JQ? Well, the hermit project provides hermit packages. And the link to this repository will also be over in the README later. By the time you see it, it will already be there. And under Cache App hermit-packages, we see names that may look familiar to you. If you're in the AWS land, AWS Copilot or AWS IAM Authenticator look pretty normal to you. There's also some general ones here, sort of like CMake and Bazel and Elm and Flutter. But if we keep looking down here, we're going to find JQ. Since we see that JQ is available from the official repository of hermit packages, let's go back over to our command line and see how to pull it in. So let's go back over to the command line. I'm going to clear this out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to type hermit search JQ. Now, since Hermit is aware that hermit packages exists, and we're saying search JQ, it actually found 2 different JQs. One is GoJQ, and the other is just JQ, which is the one that we want to use. So how do we install JQ? We can see here that there are different versions available to us, but we want to use the 1.6 version. It's pretty much as simple as hermit install. Let's take a look at what hermit install gives us. We would say hermit install and then the package. And we can do numerous packages all at once. So I could say hermit install JQ space JX space Bazel space whatever. So I could do multiples all at once, but we're just going to do a single at this moment. We can also specify the version. And for someone that likes to have versions, this also goes back to sort of container images. I don't know that I'd ever want to use latest, because latest is what is latest. But if I say specifically, in my case, JQ-1.6, then I know that in CI, on other people's laptops or desktops, I know that they're going to have the JQ 1.6 version available to them. So let's go ahead and install JQ. So I'm going to clear this out. I'm going to say hermit install JQ-1.6. And that's it. It installed it. But what did it really do? Let's take a look back at our VS Code. We can see that we have two new files here. I have a .jq16 package, which just says hermit. It's like, hermit, what's up with that? And then we take a look at JQ. And JQ is referencing .jq16 package. But this is referencing hermit. Just go with me for a few minutes. Let's go ahead and commit this change up to our repository. So I'm going to say added JQ-1.6. And I'm going to go ahead and push it up. And we will close this. Let's flip back over to our repository and see what we actually see here. So if I refresh this, I go back to bin, we see these are actually symlinks. So we see a .jq and we see JQ. So let's go back over to our job and run the job again, because we've installed JQ, right? I look at my Jenkins file and I say that Jenkins file, JQ's there. I just installed JQ in theory. Let's see what really happens. So go back to Hermit. We do a build now. We can see here that it still failed due to JQ command not found. So although that we have installed the package for JQ, we don't know where JQ really is on the path. So what we need to do is add some environment variables to get us access to our binary. Here's the reason that JQ isn't found. We haven't told our Jenkins file yet about Hermit. So let's go modify our Jenkins file to let it know about Hermit. So let's go back over to VS Code and go to our Jenkins file. And let's add in a couple of pieces of information. First off, I am going to add, once I find my notes, there they are, I'm going to add in an environment block, which sort of makes sense because we're needing to basically modify the path. So I'm setting up an item for Hermit environment vars, just made up a name, and I'm doing a .bin. Remember, I have a Hermit inside of my bin. I'm calling env-raw. Well, what does this really do? Let's go back over to our shell and see what this does. So if I do .bin/hermit env-raw, what do we see? We see a Hermit bin, so it tells us where Hermit is, Hermit environment, and then our path. And if you take a look at this path, this is telling us where all of the Hermit items live. So let's flip back over to our VS Code. So now that we've got an environment variable available to us, we need to let our step know about that environment variable. And the way we do that is with a with env. So let me grab my notes here because it's a little long. And this example is from the Hermit documentation. So again, nothing that I'm doing here that you can't go and look up on the Hermit documentation. In fact, I would recommend you go and look at the Hermit documentation to understand better what I'm doing here. So I've got a with env, and what we're doing is we're splitting on a new line, and we're changing it to a list. Now think about the output that we had here from env-raw. If we take a look at that, these are 1, 2, 3 different lines. So what we're doing here is we are taking the output of env-vars, splitting it on new line, and then we're just turning it to a list, which then feeds into with environment. So these 3 values that are here are now environment variables within the context of our Jenkins file. So let's go back over to our VS Code. All of that looks good. Let's go ahead and save that. And let's commit this up. So added hermit info, and then we'll push this up. And just for sanity, we will flip back over to our repository. Let's refresh this Jenkins file. And we see our env vars. That looks good. And we're doing our with env around curl. But now we should be able to see JQ. So let's go back over to our controller. Click on Hermit. Click on Build Now. Let's go ahead and see 3. And it just didn't refresh fast enough for me to get there. We can see that our bin hermit env raw runs for us. And then with our with env, we see curl, and then we actually see the output from JQ right here in line of our job. Now, what do you need to do if there is not a definition inside of hermit packages for a binary that you need? Recently, I did a couple of videos about sift and grype. Neither sift nor grype are defined in hermit-packages. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a separate repository to define grype today. Now, I also have sift there, and the work has already been done, but I'm going to show you that as an example. Now, sidebar. If the items that you're creating definitions for are publicly available binaries that anyone can use, what you should do is fork the hermit packages repository and put in a pull request asking to have those included in the official hermit packages repository. That would be the right thing to do. What I'm showing you is basically I have a binary that is not public, that is being hosted somewhere inside of my 4 walls that nobody has access to. That way I can make my tooling available within my 4 walls without it being defined in hermit packages. So what I'm doing is actually bad. By the time you see this, I will have PRs in for both sift and grype. Now, to prove that grype does not exist in the official hermit-packages repository, let's go back over to our shell here. I'm going to clear this out, and I'm going to say hermit search and grype. And no response, no grype found. It didn't tell me that it wasn't found, but since there's no response, that means it's not found. So what we need to do now is we need to take a look at my repository that has the grype definition. So let's flip back over to Firefox and let's go to my repository. The link for this will be in the README of our actual application repository. I have both grype and sift defined. So let's click into grype and see how this is defined. Now, you will need to take a look at the Hermit documentation to understand all of the different values that are available to you. These grype and sift definitions were created based on the jx.hcl file. And why did I pick the jx.hcl? Well, it was closest to what I want to do. One thing you'll notice down here is GitHub release. And this was the thing that I found in JX, and it made it really simple for me. This will track against GitHub release. I've defined a couple of versions, but then this will also take a look at this org and repository and keep track of these as well. So I don't completely understand how this works. It's called out in the documentation, but I'm still a little fuzzy on what it means. But at least I've defined here a handful of versions, and I didn't go all the versions, but I've defined a 0.17.0, a 0.16.0, and a 0.15.0. And it's going to be tracking against GitHub as well. Now, you'll also notice that I've defined both a Darwin, which is for Mac OS, and for Linux. Now, these are very simple definitions. These definitions, if you go through the official Hermit releases repository, you'll see lots of different ways to define these for both Darwin and for Linux. Now what you will see here is I have a replacement token here for version. So I have a version here after a V, and I also have a version within the line here for the zip file and also for the tar.gz file. So with these, I'm able to not have to create a specific one for 17 and a specific one for 16. I can do token replacement and it will just pull these in. I also have a description, and I'll also call out exactly what the binary is that's coming in from this package. And this package is either a zip or a tar.gz. Now, although I've defined a new repository that has the definition for grype today, I still can't use it at the moment because I just did a hermit search grype and it's not aware of this repository. So how do I add this repository so that Hermit sees it? So let's go back over to our shell. Let's do a clear. And let's type hermit status. And what you'll see here is actually a bunch of information. We see our environment, which isn't really surprising. We saw that earlier when we did hermit env -raw, so this is normal to us. We're well aware of this. We see our packages and the packages that are installed, and currently the only package we have installed is JQ 1.6. We did that a few moments ago. But let's take a look at sources. We can see that our sources are built in, and then we have the official hermit packages from Cash App. So what we need to do is add a new source to our definition so that Hermit can see it. So how do we do that? Remember that hermit.hcl file we saw way back in the beginning? That's going to be our answer. That is the configuration file that we use within our project. So we'll go to bin and hermit.hcl. We need to paste in sources equals, and this is in the order that you want items searched. I'm putting in, and it's an array. It ends up becoming an array. So I have GitHub, Darren Pope -hermit -packages, which is where my grype and sift definitions are. And then I also need to define my Cash App hermit packages. I could completely bypass hermit packages from Cash App if I wanted to, but I want to leave it in, so that's basically my fall through, so I can find official information for other tooling like JQ. So let's save this file. I'm going to go back over to my shell, clear this out, and let's do hermit status again. And what you're going to see here now is we have built in, we have the Darren Pope hermit packages, and then we have Cash App hermit packages. So now in theory, we should be able to run hermit search grype and find it. So let's clear this out, hermit search grype. And now we can see that grype was found. We see the versions that we want because this is coming from the repository that I created, and then the description that's there that we defined within the HCL file. Now before we go on, let's go ahead and commit that so we don't forget about it, because once we get to our CI tooling, things would not work out so well. So I'm adding new repository. Okay, there's that. Let's go and push that up. We're not going to run it just yet though. So now that we have grype set up within a definition, let's go ahead and install grype. Let's go back over to the shell. I'm going to say hermit, we've already found grype, install grype -0.17.0, because remember, I always want to install a specific version of whatever tool it is that I want. That way I know the version that I have. The shorter way to say that is, I don't want to do latest. So let's go ahead and hit enter and install grype. And much like what we saw with JQ, we have two files here. So I'm going to go ahead and add did grype. That's fine. And go ahead and push that up. Now, before we head back over to our job, let's take a look at hermit status. We can see that we have grype installed as a package, but there's also another command I want you to take a look at, and that's hermit space list. And this gives you the full experience of what packages you've installed. So you get the name, the version, and the full description. So in case hermit status isn't enough with just basically the tag of binary-version, here you can see all of the information about the packages that you have installed. Now that we've installed grype, what I want to do is I want to pick an older image that's possibly got some vulnerabilities in it. Since grype is a vulnerability scanner, let's find one and see what it does. Now, let's go back over to our Jenkins file, and let's take a look at adding a new stage. Grab my notes here. My note is right there. So what I'm going to do is I've got my with env all over again because I need my with env in order to find grype. And we're going to look at an Alpine image that's 3.10.9. Now, if we go ahead and flip back over to Firefox, what we'll see here is 3.10.9 was pushed at the time of recording 5 months ago. So in theory, there should be some vulnerabilities within this image. So let's go back over to our VS Code. Let's go ahead and commit this change. Whoops. There we go. Add this up. Added grype. And let's push this up. Okay. And let's go check it out over on our repository. And there it is. Okay, good. Now let's go back over to our job and do a build now. And what we'll see here with build 5 is that we've got our JQ just like normal. And we go down here and we see that grype is running, and it did find a problem. Now, obviously this is an older tag. There have been more tags produced since then that actually have remediated this issue. Why should you consider using Hermit to manage your tooling for you? First off, it allows you to manage the tooling and the versions of that tooling right along with your application. That way, you're not having to rely on making sure that tools and specific versions of those tools are installed on your build agents or on your developer machines. Next up, it protects your build processes from potentially conflicting versions of tools. As we saw in our example, we were using JQ 1.6. Let's imagine that our build agents have JQ 1.5 on the system path. It might work, it might not work. With Hermit, we know that we're going to have JQ 1.6 because we defined JQ 1.6. And finally, as we said at the beginning, if you're not at the point in your CI processes to where you can use ephemeral agents to where you can define tools and their specific versions, Hermit gives you that ability to define your tooling along with your application. If you have any questions or comments, you can reach out to us on Twitter at CloudBeesDevs. If this video was helpful to you, give us a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to CloudBees TV yet, why not? Take a moment, click on that subscribe button, and then ring that bell, and you'll be notified anytime there's new content available on CloudBees TV. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next video.